We've learned a lot about crypto use cases over the last decade and change since the Genesis block. We know they seem to come in waves. First, we had the money use case. That was about payments, but also about store of value. Then we achieved greater programmability, and the capital formation use case became wildly popular with the ICO craze. Most recently, we've witnessed the rise of the DeFi and NFT use cases. But none of these turned out to be that holy grail of mainstream adoption we've always been after. Now it's time for the next wave. Some people are predicting it's going to be social and then it's going to be the big one. Ready? Let's go. Today, we are going to discuss the next social wave of crypto, Elon's takeover of Twitter and the slaughter of the executives, PayPal sneaking their $2,500 fines back in, AI-generated crypto tweets being a little too accurate, and a small update on the World Mobile Aerostat program. If your first thought when you saw this image was, hey man, that's not even water. How can it be a wave? It's not even water. Hey, listen, it's a rock formation called the wave. It's actually called the wave. Or if you're finding value in these videos each weekday, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. Before we get to all this social wave business, here's something extremely important. This channel that I think we're all kind of a part of, has been nominated for an award at the Cardano Summit 2022 next month. This is the deal, though. The category in which we're a finalist is called Educational Influencer. Educational Influencer. I know what you're thinking. If you watch this channel a lot, I know exactly what you're thinking. You're thinking, this channel is not meant to be educational or influential in any way, which is something I've said many times. I don't think this channel is really supposed to be educational or influential. It's just about commenting on the Cardano space. In fact, that's what I wrote. They asked me for a bio, and I wrote, Army of Spies is a commenter on the Cardano space, full stop. I think some other people wrote a little bit more in their bio, but I felt like that was the most accurate thing because influencer has a lot of weird connotations. Educational makes me think of school and schoolwork. I think this channel is something else, but this is the category we're in. And I think it would also be very cool if we actually won this thing. So if you've got just a couple of seconds, if you enjoy this channel and you've got just a couple of seconds, if you could come over here to the Cardano Summit website. So I'm going to put a link. It'll be the very first link in the description box below this video. If you can just click on that link, come over here, click on the educational influencer category. It's the only one you'll find the Army Spies name in, and then click on connect wallet to vote. And then you can vote using either your Nami, Eternal, or Flint wallet. If you could just come over here and connect your wallet, looks like you have to verify. You have to verify through their Discord bot or an SMS service. This is something that people are probably a little bit familiar with if they've been involved in projects that do this in Discord. But if you could just come over, connect your wallet, verify, and vote, I think it'd be awesome if we actually won this thing. What might be coming next in crypto? It might be this. Here's a great thread that I think sums this up well and concisely. This poster says, as I wrote 2 weeks ago, the next wave of crypto is social. Crypto will jump off of balance sheets and investment accounts and will be woven into the fabric of our lives. Stuff like this is getting built everywhere right now. And he's referencing a tweet from Jack. You might be aware Jack is working on something he's saying is a part of Web 5. Yes, that's right. If you're not aware of this, he skipped right over Web 3 and Web 4. He's doing Web 5. Web 5 is like the Daedalus turbo of webs. They're already at Web 5. You don't need to improve Daedalus. Just go directly to Daedalus turbo. You don't need to work on Web 3. We're already working on Web 5. This is Jack Dorsey of Twitter. We won't dive into his Web 5 endeavors right now. There's plenty on that you can check out if you want to, but we will talk about Twitter a little bit later for a different reason. In this thread, this poster points out, you could leave Twitter and Instagram and take all your connections with you. The next wave of crypto, the social wave, will utterly dwarf all prior waves. It's being built everywhere right now. At some point, one of these projects is going to start growing exponentially. At that moment, buckle up. Remember the scene in Margin Call where Jeremy Irons is yelling, "This is it. I'm telling you, this is it." That's me right now. The other critical thing about social is that it's virtually unregulated. This is an important point. In crypto, we've dealt with some very highly regulated use cases. The money use case, governments tend to care about money. The DeFi use case, governments really tend to care about finance, highly regulated. NFT use case, not so much. Not so much. We kind of painted that as art, and art is not really that regulated. But then we sort of, did some exotic financialization of these things we were calling art and did a bunch of DeFi stuff with that. That part doesn't matter. And we were also kind of using them for capital formation. That part doesn't matter. We'll say that art is unregulated. Not that we used it in that way. He says, maybe the way to get crypto adopted isn't by getting everyone licensure, but by building totally independent DeFi and letting unregulated social provide the missing identity and reputation layer. This is a really crucially important point. I mean, this post only has 14 likes. This is a really important point. So we've been screaming for regulatory clarity in crypto. Give us regulatory clarity. What's wrong with you? The CFTC chair and the SEC chair can't even agree on whether or not something like Ethereum is a security. What's wrong with our dysfunctional government? And we can say that in the plural. It's a lot of different governments, not just one. We scream for regulatory clarity. The thing is, when we get that regulatory clarity, there is absolutely no guarantee that we're going to be able to meet the standards of those newly clarified regulations. It may be that they demand things from our DeFi platforms that they cannot provide or are unwilling to provide, probably in a lot of cases cannot provide. And what happens then? Then maybe the old traditional finance players come in and they build brand new things or buy things that, are a little bit more like them and sort of throw some DeFi clothes on those things and call those DeFi, and they take the place of the DeFi platforms that we know right now that can't meet the new clarified regulations. That's not a good future. That's what he means when he says maybe the way to get crypto adopted isn't by getting everyone licensure, but by building totally independent DeFi. So why is it that DeFi has to be so concerned? Why is it in crypto that we have to be so concerned about regulation and DeFi? It's because DeFi eventually has to touch identity. We have to use things like fiat on-ramps. And the second we have to use a fiat on-ramp to get into crypto so we can get into DeFi, the government is going to be able to strangle that. Governments, plural, will be able to strangle that in many different ways. So what he's suggesting here is, hey, maybe that was the wrong way to go about getting DeFi right. Maybe the right way to get DeFi right is to build up a whole new wave of crypto social platforms and let those social platforms provide the missing identity and reputation layers that are necessary for DeFi, but they'll be crypto-based social platforms. They can be decentralized. They can be permissionless. And then we'll have the pieces that we kind of need from the real world that the real world governments can very easily regulate. Then DeFi could kind of stand on its own, and it won't need to be touching those things like real world reputation layers, credit, identity. He also points out the fun part about social media as a US lawyer in crypto is that instead of saying no all the time, you can say yes all the time. Social media as a crypto use case is a lot more like the NFT thing. You can see he's already suggesting we do with DeFi and social media what we did with art and capital formation, art and DeFi with NFTs. If this is a little bit unclear, just stop for a second and think about what some projects did with NFTs and in Cardano, additionally, initial stake pool offerings. A project comes along, they need to raise some money, they already kind of know. ICOs were a 2017 thing. It's pretty obviously off the table now. Nobody wants to come out guns blaring and just do an ICO. But they can sell some NFTs, say, hey, these are just art sales. I'm just selling art here. Or in Cardano, they could do an initial stake pool offering and say, hey, this is not an ICO. This is an initial stake pool offering, completely different. And both of those things are going to accomplish the same goal as an ICO. Execute on that capital formation use case in crypto, that money raising use case in crypto. Social media is kind of similar to art in NFTs. Social media isn't nearly as regulated as anything in DeFi or any of the money type use cases. And even though I mentioned it earlier, social media obviously isn't going to necessarily solve the fiat on ramp problem. DeFi definitely has a fiat on ramp problem as far as regulation goes, but a new social media wave in crypto might solve the identity and reputation problems. DeFi needs for like an optimal implementation of DeFi needs for the players involved to have identity and reputation in the sense of creditworthiness, things like that. And social media could solve those problems for DeFi. Separate from that, crypto solves some problems in social media. The decentralization of crypto and blockchains can solve the censorship problem in social media. We're going to talk about that a little bit later in the context of what's happening in Twitter. Decentralization can also solve part of the revenue problem in social media. Okay, it's not that the social media platforms have a revenue flow problem. It's that a lot of the users of social media have or should have a problem with the revenue flows in social media. So the social media platforms are making plenty of money, but all of the content is being produced by the users, and that's creating revenue flows. The data of the users is also being used to create revenue flow. Advertisers are given access to that data so they can target their ads, and the social media platforms are making money off that as well. The decentralization of blockchains could allow for those revenue flows to go to the users. You could create smart contracts that allow for the users to get paid by the advertisers for the value of the content they produce instead of just the social media platform getting paid for that and the users getting nothing but free use of the social media platform. Users, if they wanted to opt in, it could be optional. If users wanted to opt in to a program that shares their data with advertisers for targeting purposes, they could also opt into that, and the users could get paid for that instead of the social media platform. Of course, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There are people who have thought very deeply about crypto and blockchain social media, and there are about 1 million other topics that could be covered under this umbrella. But if you haven't thought about this much before, I think you get the idea. Blockchain, decentralized, crypto-based social media could be a lot better for the users. We haven't even talked about sort of payments on the social media platforms, tipping for content, all of those kind of things. It could be a lot better for the users. And the decentralization could also solve the censorship problem, which is a problem both for the users and for the platforms. What's being pointed out in this thread is that crypto social media could also solve the identity and reputation problems in DeFi. Speaking of social media, it looks like Elon has consummated the deal to acquire Twitter, and people are immediately posting memes like this That's Elon as Thanos, and the CEO and CFO and head of legal all disappearing as Elon snaps his fingers. This, of course, is to represent the fact that he axed these executives immediately. There are even some reports that one of them had to be accompanied by security to get them out of the building. This, of course, if you're aware how this works, this is a normal kind of thing. A lot of times executives don't want any ambiguity over whether or not they quit or they were fired, because they have provisions in their contract that say they get some special amount of something if they're actually fired with no cause. So if you're in that position, it can sometimes be you can sometimes receive advice to not leave willingly and to have security escort you out of the building, because then it's less ambiguous whether you quit or you were fired. If security forces you out of the building, then it's pretty obvious you were fired. So I don't think it's anything. I it's often not the case that the person was like angry and being irrational and security actually had to escort them out of the building. It's often the case that they're just like, have security escort me out of the building. So, and the person firing them is usually more than happy to do that. Sometimes the person firing them also just does it because they want to make a point. Who knows what actually happened here, but it sounds like these three individuals definitely got fired right off the bat. And according to reports, it sounds like Elon is planning on firing a whole bunch of other people. And I think this is certainly part of the rationale. This poster said, bye-bye cancel culture. Twitter was kind of like the epicenter of the censorship problem for social media platforms. And the head of legal over here, this is the person that appeared with Jack Dorsey on the Joe Rogan podcast to answer questions about the censorship that was going on. And she kind of became the personification of social media censorship. So no surprise, Elon has said from the start, one of his big goals was to restore freedom of speech on Twitter. I personally thought this one was definitely the best meme. You'll recognize this, the original footage here, if you watch ADV China, now called The China Show, I think. But Twitter was not the only company in the news today. We also saw these reports about PayPal. PayPal quietly added the $2,500 penalty back again. Looks like they won't let go of this. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago when they added language about basically confiscating $2,500 from people if people did certain things that basically sounded like they amounted to speech. If you engaged in some speech that they didn't like, they were just going to take $2,500 out of your account. And of course, people started closing their accounts. And then PayPal came back and said, oh, that was a mistake. We weren't supposed to include that language. Total mistake. That's not actually in there. Now we're getting reports that's back in there in a different version. This one says, you acknowledge and agree that $2,500 per violation of the acceptable use policy is presently a reasonable minimal estimate of PayPal's actual damages. PayPal may deduct such damages directly from any existing balance in any PayPal account you control. And of course, it's, a similar list of horrible things that I think most people could get behind, things that most people would agree, it's okay for PayPal to restrict these kind of transactions. But they also have this language, this very ambiguous language here, other forms of intolerance that is discriminatory. And what people are worried about is the discretion that PayPal would have to determine that you engaged in a transaction that promoted some form of something that they think is intolerant and discriminatory, because that could be a lot of things that maybe the average person doesn't think are intolerant or discriminatory. And of course, people are doing the exact same thing as before, posting screenshots showing that they've closed their accounts. Good job, PayPal. You just got looks like exactly the same result as last time. You probably remember a couple of weeks ago, we talked about how AI generated art was getting really good. And some people were beginning to become disturbed because AI generated art was starting to win art contests like at state fairs. This week, people in crypto are having fun with AI generated tweets. Tim Bako, who you'll probably know is an important Ethereum core developer, posted this tweet that an AI had created for him. The problem being, even if it's slightly misspelled, the problem is it's a little bit too accurate from some perspectives. It says, I think 2 to 3 years of Ethereum is enough time for the market to settle. Until then, Ethereum is probably still in beta. I think a lot of us in Cardano might agree with that. Finally, let's check in with one of my favorite projects, World Mobile. Their post says, here we have a closer shot of the Aerostat base station in Zanzibar, savoring a moment of history. Check out this photo. I had no idea. When I started my Cardano journey, I had no idea that Cardano would eventually have a project like this that was launching balloons in Zanzibar that would provide internet connectivity to people who are not connected to the internet. I think their mission of connecting the unconnected is a great one. I hope this Aerostat project is hugely successful. I also hope you had a great week and that you're doing something fun this weekend, and I'll talk to you soon.